A new study claims to debunk some of the stereotypes linked with the so-called millennial generation, with possible implications for the workforces of the future. The study defines millennials as those born between 1984 and 1996.
And by the year 2020, they'll make up over half of the global workforce. More than 16,000 millennials in over 40 countries were surveyed. Here are some of the key findings. Work-life balance is very important to millennials. 73% pick that over higher pay, while 82% value it over their position in a company.
Over 40% do want leadership roles. As you can see, they are mainly driven by money, influence, and having the chance to play a strategic role. But for most of them, the focus is on personal growth and learning new things. Only a quarter want a fast-track career with constant promotions.
And when it comes to career choice, they make up their own minds. Only 10% say their parents' opinions are important, while a mere 5% are strongly influenced by friends. The only exception is in the Asia-Pacific. More on that in a while.
And joining us from two of the organizations behind the study are Vinika Devasa Rao, Executive Director of the Emerging Markets Institute at INSEAD, and Henrik Bresman, Academic Director of the HEAD Foundation. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Now, let's start with that last bit we just spoke about. What influences the career choices of millennials? You found a difference here in the Asia-Pacific compared with elsewhere. What exactly was the difference?
Well, one of the things that we found was that Asian millennials, they were more interested in traditional things like, say, titles and money as rewards. But perhaps the most interesting piece was the part related to influence and how Asian millennials, including millennials based here in Singapore, are very much influenced by their peers, which gets to one of the interesting tensions that Asian millennials seem to experience, which we don't see in the West. The tension between individualistic beliefs and collectivistic beliefs. Here the question seems to be, well, how can I be myself while still belong?
Right. But is there any indication as to why that is? Why are they more influenced by their peers?
I think it has to do with the history. The history which is, in this region, been more collectivistic. Now we see that the individualistic influences that you see all over the world in the millennial generation is coming here too. But there is the tension here that we just don't see in the Western world.
Right.
Now, another finding, which was half of those surveyed say it's very important to them to get feedback from their managers, a quarter want feedback every week. Vinika, can you tell me, is this just one way in which workplace cultures will have to change significantly to attract and retain these millennials?
No, it is a significant difference from what we see in organizations these days, where typically feedback only happens maybe once in a year or maybe once every 6 months or so. So it is going to be a big difference. And I think the reason this is required is because one of their biggest fears for this generation is the fear of getting stuck. They want to evolve both personally and professionally on a regular basis, and they need that feedback to be able to constantly make the changes that are required to be able to do this. And hence, yes, this is something that organizations are going to need to take very seriously to be able to give them that constant pat on the back.
What do you think are the top 3 things millennials look for in management?
Well, in terms of what they're looking for from their managers and their leaders, interestingly, in Singapore, we found that a very large proportion of millennials want their managers to empower them. Again, maybe it leads back to wanting to keep on developing. In other parts of the world, in Central and Eastern Europe, for instance, we found that they were more interested in managers who are technical and functional experts themselves. The younger millennials, the ones who are actually born in the 1990s, are interested in role models from their leaders.
All right, so what do you think, will be the biggest challenges? And Henrik, perhaps you can, come in on this in terms of grooming this sort of next generation of workplace leaders.
It's a good question. I think that the greatest challenge clearly is the individualistic characteristics of this generation. It's not one size fits all. You need to figure out what the individual person actually needs and likes, and the flip side of that, though, the reward for that work is that we really believe that this generation will be a phenomenal generation once they reach the leadership ranks in organizations and society at large.
And one of the findings was that a whopping 64% of millennials say the most important part of the company is the friendliness of people. Did this come as a surprise to both of you?
Not really. I see that as a reaction to what is their perception of their parents' workplace. So it's not that they would like to go to the workplace and sit on the floor and sing Kumbaya. It's just that they want to have a better place than their parents had in their perception.
Oh, well, what about this issue of retirement? Hot topic for everybody. 45% of millennials want to retire by the age of 60. How realistic is that when retirement ages are sort of going up around the world?
I think this is probably a reflection of the fact that this generation is not as pessimistic as we've been assuming for the last few years. They actually feel that they will do better in the most part than their parents did. And so there is still a tendency to believe that they will be able to retire earlier, which is interesting given that youth unemployment is as high as it is.
All right, thanks very much for those perspectives. Thanks so much to both of you for coming into the studios today. That was Vinika Devasarao from the Emerging Markets Institute and Henrik Bresman there from the Head Foundation.